Okay, being 7 o'clock, do I have a motion to open tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are open. Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Finance Committee. It is February 15th, 2023. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'd like to start off the meeting by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so on the agenda tonight, we're going to resume our budget hearings. To start off the hearings tonight, we have our town clerk, Ms. Pamela Lamonti. Pam?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. I can't believe it's already been a year. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Time flies.
I'll say. Actually, I'm gonna, let me give you my usual breakdown. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to take one for Sue Delgado too, because she's running a little late.
Sure.
Yeah, she's going to need a seat. I don't know what happened to her.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess she'll come over here then.
Thank you.
Put that over there for me.
Yeah. Oh, it's a hot burn, okay.
Valentine's for, I found it on the floor.
There you go.
Okay, I figure I'll start with the town clerk budget. And pretty much, I'm gonna go according to my sheet here, but I did meet with Mr. Kelly today, and I think we have all of our numbers in line. So starting with the town clerk's stipend, that has remained level funded. Clerical, I've given you a breakdown of, I have 2 staff members in my office, both of 30 hours. One is a senior clerk and the other is a clerk. I've given you what their hourly rates are and their annual salary based on the union contract, okay? I have increased the temporary line item $2,000 and that to bring it up to $3,000, and that's to cover the staff that's needed for the additional hours for early voting, vote by mail, pretty much anything that's over their normal 30 hours that they would work, up to 35. And you will notice the next line down, I have overtime, that's at $1,000, which is increased. Over the last few years, actually since COVID, we had a number of changes that have taken place with the Mass General laws. As you know, early voting is now here, vote by mail is now here. That has added a lot more, many more demands to the office. It has required nights, weekends, including Sundays. So I have to have the overtime available for my staff members that work over the 35 hours that are eligible for overtime. For longevity, I have 1 employee right now. Next year, I do anticipate that my other employee, God, hope that she's still with us then, that line item will need to be increased, but for right now, this is just a contractual amount. R&M office equipment is level funded from my 2023 budget. Vital statistics, that was increased up to $600, and that's for the annual binding of all of our vital records that come in, our deaths, births, and marriages. And this is something that during COVID, I did not budget for, primarily because no one was doing the binding. So it didn't make any sense to budget for it, knowing that the funds would end up back in the general fund. So I left that out. I did budget the year after. I didn't budget last year only because I knew we weren't going to have the time with the 3 elections and 2 town meetings to be able to do the binding. So I have that back in the in as a line item, just so that way we can get back on schedule. I don't want to get too far behind with that. Office supplies is level funded. Software expense, I was able to reduce that down $150, and that's for our marriage program that we have, that we utilize. I did not include in there for the dog licensing program. We've spoke about the last time that our dog program, or should I say the server that is the dog program is on its last leg. And I'm working right now with Nick to be able to work with the company and get us out of the program we're in into a new program. But that will be part of the technology line item, so I won't need to budget for that. Dog licenses, I did have to increase that $300. I don't know what is going on, other than the fact that since COVID, we have not been able to get the cost of the tags down. We used to have the tags done and then have them marked with black ink so that it would help Becky, the animal control officer, if she has a dog on a pole, that she'd be able to read the number without having to get too close. Unfortunately, because the cost has become so much for the tags, we haven't been able to do that since COVID hit. But I still need an additional $300 just to cover the base tags. And that is with a new vendor, because I moved on from another vendor who was even, the prices were even crazier. So.
Is that, Pam, is that like
Yeah.
is that a vendor that's in the United States?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yes. They're in Ohio, I think. I think that one's in Ohio. One of them is in New Hampshire. I'm not sure which one. But yes, definitely Massachusetts. I mean, the United States. Travel has been reduced to $100, and that is, again, for continuing education, so I can continue with my certification. It also covers classes that my staff is available to take as well. Dues and subscriptions, I've level funded. Bonding is level funded, and additional equipment, I level funded that at $1 for this year. I don't anticipate anything going wrong in the wake of equipment, so I think we should be okay for this year.
Just a quick question, you mentioned the server, how much are you looking at, or do you have ballpark how much that's gonna run?
It'll be in the technology budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're on, I think 7 right now, Microsoft 7.
yeah.
Oh, Windows 7.
Windows 7, yeah.
Oh, so you're just using like a workstation to do the serving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's not, all right, so I saw it was a full-fledged server, okay. That's a little bit.
Where it's part of the comprehensive get away from.
Yeah. Yeah, Windows 7's the end of life, so there's
Yeah.
no more support or anything like that. Yeah.
Right. And I have been having some issues with the vendor, the support for getting support from the vendor. So it's time anyway, even if it wasn't the server we need to do something. Any questions on the town clerk budget? Okay. We can move on to the Board of Registrars. The Board of Registrars, it is decreased, only $131. But this is going to cover my registrar, the use of the registrars for the special town meeting, our annual town meeting, early voting, vote by mail, presidential primary. I think I've covered all of them. One of the things that has taken place now that we've changed precincts, We've added an additional precinct. Because of that, and because the congressional lines have changed, it has required that we now have 2 different ballot styles. So before we used to do our testing, we have to do up a special grid. It's very, unfortunately, it's a lot of manual labor because we have to mark every ballot and we have to do it just as though we're a voter. But we have to create a grid first, so that way when we put the ballots through the machine, we know that they're recording properly. So if we put down someone for DA, we need to make sure that the person that we chose on that ballot is actually being counted properly. We used to do 50 ballots of testing. For a primary, we would have to do 2 different ballots, so that was 100 ballots. Now, we not only have Democrat and Republicans, but they've also brought back the Libertarian Party. So I have 150 ballots that we have to process there for 2 precincts, and then another 150 for another 2 precincts. So instead of just working with 3 ballots for a primary, we're now working with 6, which can be a little bit complicated at times, but it's important that we make sure that everything is tested properly.
Is this because of the separation of the districts then?
Yes, yeah. So what I've done is I just kind of listed also underneath what the line item covers. I'm not going to bore you by going into all of that, but just to give you an idea of other things that are kind of wrapped up into this line item. As I mentioned before, the last few years have been very different because the laws have changed so much. And we've been getting kind of piecemeal some funding from the state. Effective January 1st of 2023, it has been the acts of 2022 have been enacted. So the Votes Act has now put the burden on the town. So those are all extra costs that we will need to absorb. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing some of these numbers might be a little bit inflated. And believe me, if there was anything I could do to bring it down, I absolutely would. But we all know what's going on around the country with elections, and if anything, I don't want to give our residents and voters any opportunity to have to doubt our process. So I want to make sure that we follow everything to the T. Voting program and movers, that is decreased $85. That is, again, another change. These extra precincts, we now have 5 voting tabulators, whereas before we only had 4. So that's all, we have to have everything coded, all of the memory packs and the flash drives for that, as well as the handicap accessible machine. The census, the 1513 is, oh, is my time up?
No, we don't keep the timer.
You can keep on me, but.
That's to make sure my husband picks up my daughter.
That's important, very important. That 1513 is exactly the cost of what it will be for our annual census, the printing of the book, which again is mandated by the state. What I do is I print up a minimal, have the vendor print up a minimal amount of books. And then if we need more throughout the year, we print them up and bind them in-house, in our own office.
Is the no option of making this all online and that all has to be printed?
We can do it online. Actually, we did do, because of COVID, there was one year that they were so behind that I only printed up the actual, what we needed for archiving.
Is that a cost savings to you to do it online?
It would be a cost savings, but I can tell you that these books go out to all the different departments, and I know we give them to police and fire, and the hard copy is really what most need.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
We can't do that in-house with copying machines and stuff that we have?
Well, what happens is when we have to do an extract to get all of the information,
Yeah.
the vendor then works their magic.
Okay.
I wouldn't even know where to begin doing that. They get it all set up for us. Do we print it in-house? We do, once they've done all of the maintenance, I guess you could say, and the formatting of everything. Because you also have to take into consideration that we can pull a list of all of our voters in town and all of our residents in town, but we need to pull out our public service individuals. We have to pull out all of the individuals that are under 17 and under. That cannot go through be public information. So, and I only print 50 books. So the real cost is in that formatting and
So it's the layout and the stuff like that, it's part of that process? Okay.
Right. We do as much as we can from our end, but that I wouldn't even want to get involved with. Let's see. And office supplies, we just decreased that slightly. And the biggest expense for that is our paper and our envelopes, because every census goes in an envelope. Every census has a return envelope for them to send it back to us. And I'm sure you've all received your census for this year. I tried to maximize by putting in the most amount of information in there. The dates at a glance, so you know when your water bill is due, when your taxes are going to be due, and then also I always put in a little bit of a reminder that to make sure that they license their dogs and to return the census, which is the most important thing. Any questions on the Board of Registrars? No? Okay. Moving on to the larger adjustment, which is town meeting and elections. And this is strictly for the salaries or the wages for people that are working the elections, working early voting. And to give you a better idea, I broke it down by election and early voting times and also town meeting. And again, I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but I've listed each election with the dates if we know the dates. And I came up with a total of $15,764. That is only for the election days, the town meeting days, and the in-person early voting. That does not include the people that I need in the office doing all of the organizing, creating the ballot packet so that we can then send them out to everyone that has applied for that has sent in an application and applied for a ballot. That is not included in that cost at all. What I typically do is for early voting, if it's quiet, I will pull a clerk or an inspector and have them come in and help us behind the scenes. But I need a little bit more of a cushion to have those people come in to help us to do the sorting, to do the processing, doing the labels. It's a very manual intensive system, unfortunately. And there really is no way to automate it unless we were a much larger community. So I added an additional $3,000 to be able to have those people come in. And on top of that, I'm also utilizing the senior work-off people. That has been helpful as well. I've had 2 individuals come in the office. I've got another one coming in on Friday, which is great. But they can only do so much. Election staff really has to do some of the actions. So I'm basing these figures pretty much on what has happened in the last couple of years. Now that we know that this is law, I believe I'll be able to have a better handle on the numbers after this year. But again, and a lot of it was trial and error because we had never done vote by mail and early voting. So we've learned a lot along the road to kind of streamline things. But that's where I'm at. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Nobody in the group?
Just a quick, just wondering, is there a big difference between vote by mail and early voting? They're not
The difference is
or absentee ballots?
vote by mail is identical to the process of absentee.
Okay.
Just called something different now.
Right, and it's on a much larger scale. So I'm sure you all realize or noticed that with your census, I also included a vote by mail application. And I did that, it was not required by law, but we will not be holding an in-person session week for voting because we do get a much better turnout with the vote by mail than we have with the in-person voting. So it makes more sense. I think the dollars are spent better with the vote by mail. The last time we did in-person voting for a primary, which it wasn't a presidential, but we had 116 people come out, and it cost us thousands to do. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, because we can send out all of these ballots to people that have requested them. They don't have to send them back. So now we've gone through all of that labor and hard work of getting them out there, and then they might look at the ballot and say, there's really nothing that I'm concerned with, and might not return it. That does happen. But we've gotten a really, really good response back, much better than the in-person.
On a lighter note, a
Yes.
silly question. On the census, you have a column for cats. Is there a reason why there's a cat thing?
No, quite a few years ago, we were having a vendor do the census.
Okay.
And I tried a couple of different vendors, and I had problems every time we did it. There was one vendor that sent out like 5 census, to certain households. There just weren't things it was costing us more money to use the vendor because of the mistakes that were happening. So what we do is we use the form that comes from the state. People do fill it out. It is not a requirement.
I could have seen the dogs because of the dog tags and stuff.
Right,
Why
that
is it
is
cats?
extremely
New fee.
helpful with
Yeah.
the dogs, yes, but the cats,
Cat fee.
yeah.
So some
Yeah,
communities-
no,
basically
no. We've
Yeah.
got enough.
Some
we have
communities
enough
Some
like-
communities, they probably, register cats, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pam, thanks for coming in tonight. If we have any questions, we'll reach out.
Sure. Thank you very much.
All
And
right.
Mr. Kelly, thank you for meeting with me today and making sure that we were all on the same page. Okay.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up to bat is our police chief, Chief Richmond.
Because I've heard this already. Just like you heard me.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone.
Welcome.
Indulge me, I'm gonna take my glasses off too, see, I'm not sure what that's indicative of, but anyway. I'd like to start with, on the expense side, the easy side first, then we'll hit salaries if that's okay. And I'm gonna be working off the document, be working off request A. And on the expense side,
They don't know A, B, or C.
Okay.
They've got
Okay,
the
so-
town administrator.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so on the expense side, the first thing, academy expenses, we zeroed that out mainly because I don't anticipate having to send anybody to the police academy in FY '24. We currently have 3 in the police academy now, knock on wood, we 2, due to graduate in early July. So I don't anticipate having to send anyone in, so we zero that right out. The rest of the line items are pretty much are level funded to what they are this year. Taking into account some increases, we're able to tweak a little bit. The only significant increase would be in 5850, which would be vehicles, and that would be the state bid list for 2 Mark cruises this year. There's an increase over last year. As a matter of fact, we've had some difficulty getting cruises this last year. Not to
This
go
is a surprise.
yeah, components and everything else, but we had ordered 2 vehicles, 2 Mark units, based on our, for the FY '23 budget, but we were told in July that order was canceled. So we were able to get one of those vehicles back, and we took delivery of it in November. The second one, we're told we're gonna take delivery of it in, although it's not on the lot yet, we're told April, and then it's gonna be upfitted and whatnot, so the vehicles have been very, very difficult to come by. This year, we're gonna give it a try. The Dodge Corporate, seems to be getting out of the police cruiser business, which is very, very bad for us, because we made the switch a few years ago from the Fords to the Dodges, because Ford had some defect issues that were very, very difficult to correct once they came out of warranty, water pumps and things of that nature. The 3 Dodges that we have now, other than Deere jumping out in front of the cruisers, have operated very well. But after, talking to some of the area departments, we're looking at Tahoes for this upcoming fiscal year. And they actually have better gas mileage slightly than both the Durangos and the Fords. So I'm told, because we're going with a Chevy product, that those will be available. The gist of it is that Dodge Corporate is not letting the individual lots order stock for Durangos for police departments. All of them have to be pre-ordered, and you have to have PO numbers for those particular vehicles before they will even, so to speak, reserve them for you. Now, we're working off the FY '24 budget, we technically wouldn't be able to get a PO number until the budget's approved on July 1st, so we wouldn't be seeing those vehicles till probably after the first of the year at best case. So Chevy is not doing it that way. I'm assured that the dealership that we're gonna be dealing with is getting between 350 to 400. I told them I'm gonna budget for 2, but I won't know that's approved until town meeting. And I was told it wasn't a problem, they can put a post-it with our name on those, and once we know that it's approved after July 1, they can start working on them.
Are they fully gas, are they hybrids?
These are still gas.
I was just gonna ask that, because we asked that last year, I think.
Yeah, and I'm still
Switching.
not sold on hybrid for what we use it for a couple
Oh,
of
I'm not
reasons.
sold on it.
Mainly the electronics that we use in the car, between the lights and the computers and the radios and things of that nature.
Fires.
Well, yeah, that's another thing, dig it out of the tank of Chief Fallon, right? So that's the biggest increase, that's really the only increase under expenses. And like I mentioned before, most of the money in expenses is already spoken for. I'd say the vast majority, probably about 85 to 90% of the money is already spoken for through the purchase of vehicles. There's software agreements, maintenance agreements on different pieces of equipment that we have in the building, and we run our computers on. So there's very, very little, I don't even want to call it discretionary spending, but there's a very little amount of money in there to say, hey, well, I'd like to get this year, even if it's a small piece of equipment. Sometimes we have to wait till the end of the year or not get it at all. So that's been true certainly in my I guess this would be my 4th budget presenting, but even prior to that budget's been pretty well carved out to the bone.
Chief, I got a
Yes, sir.
question. with regards to vehicles, you haven't heard anything about any potential mandates coming down the road with regards to electric police cruisers?
No, I haven't. The only ones that I know of that are not mandates, but the only electric cruisers that I know of that have been used in the area are not frontline cruisers. There's a chief in the area that drives an fully electric Mustang. I'm not
Electric Mustang doesn't sound good, but.
but I'm, you know what I mean? Yeah, as far as for frontline cruisers, no. No, I haven't heard anything on the frontline cruisers. I mean, a lot of the cruisers that are bought, a lot of the police vehicles, I should say, are bought that are electric or this, so sometimes are, I won't say show vehicles, but almost public relations vehicles. Where they wrap them with these different wraps for promoting different awarenesses and whatnot. Or in this case, an electric Mustang, which looks really sharp, but I'm selling my car, so the orange one, but anyhow. So that's pretty much on the, that's it on the expense side.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Just so the committee will know, the chief and I have been dealing with issues with their server, which you can't let it go down because it won't restart.
That's pretty much accurate.
And some other backup issues that there is an article that we're working with, but there's going to be considerably more put into the technology article that's going to be paid for out of free cash.
Do you have a ballpark on what you're looking at? Do you have any quotes or anything?
I have one, but I'm waiting on it updating, 'cause it's a little bit old now, because I do have the article open from last fiscal year for $40,000. It's obviously the time it's going up. If I had to guess,
Lots more.
if I had to estimate just based off all other things have increased, I'd say that the cost is probably closer to 70 now, 75. Between soup to nuts with what we want to do in regards to backup.
So it's not just a server, it's a bunch of...
Server, some backup ability, potential of cloud backup in addition, because our data is our data, like everywhere else. You need, if you don't have like 4 backups, you really don't have one. So the way that the system would be constructed is, as the system is constructed now, and as it would be constructed is the server itself has two mirrored drives, so there's the same data on both, so if one goes down, the other one goes down.
Right.
And then we have backup media on site, which is getting to be outdated, so we're gonna go with another option on site, and then at some point, once we get everything squared away, graduate to the cloud is like a 4th backup, so to speak. But there's some discussion with the IT vendor looking at a server that actually manages, has server management software, a certain brand name, that basically manages the server, so if one of them, say, goes down or something goes bad, it automatically bounces your data from this server to this blade, so to speak, and so there's no downtime. At the same time that's happening, whatever's wrong is an email being sent out to the vendor and to myself to say exactly what's wrong with what piece. So it's kind of a seamless type thing, whereas, to build on what Mr. Kelly just said, there is a certain fear when we have to restart a server, right now. But we have some money, like from the article, but as Mr. Kelly said, the remainder is gonna be in that omnibus article for technology.
Thank you.
Okay, on to salaries. I'm gonna go through and then we'll go back and I'll kind of speak specifically to a couple of issues. 5110, my salary, that's level funded. My contract expired in June 30th of 2022. 5111, police permanent salaries. That contract has been expired since June 30th of 2021. Dispatch, they just settled recently, but there's an interest in perhaps maybe reopening that based on some issues we're having with attracting candidates and having candidates being poached by other departments based on the area pay scales. I'll come back to that. Administrative assistant has been without a COLA this year, so that's level funded as of now. Salaries, academy cadets, again, I don't anticipate sending anybody to the academy in FY24, so we cut that out. Town details, I left that blank for now, and it's kind of a 6 1/2 dozen other. The thought behind that is my understanding is on occasion, let me backtrack. When there's an election, there's police officers there. Now, traditionally, in my tenure and 10 years before, we'll put a uniform officer from Acushnet there, at straight time or overtime, depending on who's available. What we've run into, especially this year, is difficulty filling basic shifts based on our staffing shortage. So what we were forced to do this year is in order to have a mechanism to be able to hire outside officers, whether it be our retirees or officers from another community, we had to create a pay code, so to speak, that would be like the detail rate, but it hits our regular salaries line item, and we were forced to do that. It's the first time that we've had to do that in my 28 years with the department, and I'm not sure if it probably is a trend. It's probably going to continue into the future based on when people want to work and don't want to work. But my thought on this was, if it's a town election, it's going to. I'm not. And maybe, of course, there's people here with a lot more expertise than me. I don't feel comfortable billing like the town clerk's office. Like, as long as it's transparent, we know what the cost is. Well, I'm going to pay it. I don't have an issue doing that. I don't know that we've ever invoiced them or billed them in the past, to do that. And the cost per election, we're looking between whether, a combination rate, whether it be overtime and detail, we're probably looking per election somewhere between, $3,000 to as much as $4,000. And again, a lot of that's contingent on if it's somebody working at overtime, who is working at overtime, what's the rate? Is it one of these elections where we're required to have 4 officers there, or can we get away with 3? And I coordinate with Pam, on that as far as the number of officers. Sometimes we'll try to get 4. If we can't get 4, we'll go with 3. But even though all the precincts are in the same building, housed in the same building, we are required to have 1 officer per precinct. I come from a time when, back before the library was the library, it was the community center. There used to be 2 precincts there, and there would be 1 officer that would work it. You have 2 machines, but unfortunately, that's not available or not allowed anymore. But the amount that would be in there would be minimal anyway. Based on the number of elections. If there's 2 elections, I think in FY24, Pam had told me, you're talking at most, $6,000 or $8,000. But if it's coming from overtime, it's going to come from my regular budget anyway. As long as there's a recognition as to, that we're paying that, because I want nothing more than to create another invoice and bill another town department. It makes no sense at all under these circumstances. To me, that's just something a service that we provide, and just go from there. We'll skip over overtime. Longevity, that's just a slight increase there based on contractual obligations. Somebody's going up a step and able to collect. Back to overtime, 5130. Overtime obviously has been an issue. Dr. Boucher was here when I was speaking to her back, and actually a couple other members were here as well back in January, speaking to the overtime issue. We discussed this last night before the Board of Selectmen, and it's clear that the overtime number here is inaccurate. It's the structure is faulty and has been faulty for a long time. I can tell you the average, overtime rate, since FY17 through FY22, not counting the year we're in now, is $441,000, and it's been that, like I said, going back to FY17. So 6 years, it's been 441 consistently. I'm budgeted, or the police department's been budgeted for around this amount, 255. Obviously something's not going to work there. You can't make a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle with only 70 pieces. And part of the discussion last night that came out, and I agree with 100%. It's not fair to other departments. It's not fair to the police department, but it's not fair to the other department, because if we force feed this number in there, at the end of the year, I'm going to come looking for money. We don't have a choice, because we know about what it's going to be, and it's not fair to the other departments where they might be, saving money till the end of the year. Say, hey, I'm going to do this project, and say May, I want to make sure I have enough money, for my regular budget, and they're scrimping and saving. Then it gets to be May, and then there's spending freeze, because somebody like me has to swoop in and try to get money and try to make ends meet. So I wouldn't appreciate it if I was on the other side of that. I certainly can feel for those people there. So there's certainly that number has to be adjusted. You know, whether that number is 441 or 400, I couldn't tell you, but it's at least got to be the realization that that number is at least about $150,000 short. And that's not counting the year we're in now based on the, you know, the staffing situation we're in. I mean, we're burning through overtime that, this year, just to put the minimum number of people on the road and to be able to have somebody answer the phone when you're down 911. There is some help on the horizon this year, whether it's not gonna stopgap, but we do have some help on the way. But the number's not real, for, you know, not to be disrespectful to anybody or put it out there, the number's not real. And, you know, I'm not asking for the 441, although I'll take it if you got some lying around, but in reality, it's probably, you know, around 4, you know, or better. At least that would give me a fighting chance based on some of the, you know, some of the other monies we have come in sometimes to make things meet. And I can tell you, you know, if I were to get a higher amount there, amount closer to what I need, it's not. You gotta have some, and I'm not saying you, but it just in general, there's some trust in the department head that it's not gonna be like, come, you know, May, hey, we got $100,000 in overtime, everybody come in on Saturday, we'll have a cookout and get paid 8 hours overtime. That's not gonna happen. You know, there's gonna be some, you know, some recognition, rather than me come begging at the end of the year, that, you know, at the end of the year, if I have extra, hey, this is what we have. You know, we're gonna run the department the way we need to run the department. But that's it on overtime. To the point, to jump up the dispatch salaries, we had a brief discussion last night. Although that contract just settled, we normally run 4 full-time dispatches on a rotating 4-2 schedule in our dispatch area. One, as of January 14th, was appointed to full-time police academy, was guaranteed a spot. She's actually in week 2 now, which is tremendous. She's gonna come help us on the police side. But that obviously creates a void on the other side. But because her spot wasn't guaranteed until mid-January, we can only start the search then. While we were in the midst of that search, second dispatcher came and gave me her notice as well, that she was gonna leave full-time employment. And she was joining a job that was actually more in line with what she had gone to school for, so taking a step up or going more into her career path, which is admirable. She has agreed to stay on, you know, per diem. It remains to be seen how many shifts she'll actually take to help out. So we're actually looking for 2 full-time dispatchers right now. So what we've done in the meantime, and it's maybe very unpopular around the building, but people understand it, is we're forced to contract. We had, you know, 2 detectives that did a lot, picked up a lot of the, I won't say picked up the scraps, but they have responsibilities, but they also kind of plugged holes here and there. Unfortunately, right now they're both in uniform for the foreseeable future until we at least get some people on board. I've also had to reduce somewhat the number of hours that the school resource officer spends at the school to help stem the gap, so as we have enough people to answer the phone and go to calls, and not to burn out the 2 dispatches that we have. Hopefully that's relatively short term, but that's kind of where we're at there. But the 2 dispatchers that are there now have both been contacted by a neighboring department looking to hire them, and have offered them basically pay and vacation commensurate with their years of experience, which is amounted to about a $4 or $5 an hour raise. You know,
That's tough to.
That's always been the problem we have.
yes, no, it has, and over the years though, you know, we've, you know, at least in my time, you know, I've able to, you know, I don't know if it's my sparkling personality or what, but I've been able to entice on the dispatch side and recruit really, you know, offices, a couple of offices, you know, that had the full-time academy. I've been able to, you know, just in the 3 years, I've been able to get 2 that have come from other jurisdictions. And on the police side, on the dispatch side, 3. I've been able to get 3 from neighboring jurisdictions that were already trained. Unfortunately, you know, 2 of them have since moved on, but I mean, we've been able to do that initially, but it's hard to maintain them. And the 2 that we have are the long-term personnel that really, you know, keep the ship running up there between the 2 of them. And to lose, you know, 1 or both of them would I'm not sure where we'd be, to be honest with you. We'd be devastated.
How many officers, just curious, are you required for safety, do you have per shift?
We have 3 on the road per shift.
Does that include a sergeant?
Yes.
So you have a sergeant and two?
A sergeant and two.
And then a
sergeant two.
dispatch.
And then dispatch, yes. When, as recently as a year ago, when, before the two officers left for the state police, and the 3 officers went on military duty, we had 4 officers on the 4 to 12, 4 patrol officers committed to the role, I should say 4, a sergeant and 3 committed to 8 to 4, and a sergeant and 3 committed to 4 to 12. But we weren't replacing the first person out to reduce overtime. Unfortunately, as of May of 2022, that went away. And then we actually even had open lines. We didn't even have all the lines filled. So that's kind of where we're at now. As far as the dispatch goes, we're in the process of collecting comparables to see, you know, where exactly everybody stands. And, you know, like I said, the contracts, you know, the unsettled contracts in the realm of things, it would be a minimal amount of money, I think, to the base pay, you know, in the realm of things. But certainly the adjustment has to be made somehow on the overtime side.
I think we prefer an honest number,
Yeah.
a legitimate, you know, a realistic number, I
Yeah.
should say.
Like I said, this number that we're in now, the year we're in now is not gonna be a good number. Like this would be the aberration year, that even if we were budgeted for, you know, $400,000, $425,000, we probably still would be coming back at the end saying, hey, this is where we are, which is the point of doing a quarterly update, so we can know exactly where we stand.
Do you know, are there any officers that you can see in the horizon that are up or will be putting in retirement that you know of?
Potentially, yes.
So we
We
have,
can't-
so we have that to look forward to.
We can't go into detail.
No, I'm just trying to think, are we talking, you know,
Nothing is nearly as devastating to losing 5 officers in the first week of May. You know, and I would like to think that, you know, the 3 that are coming back from the military will be back sometime between May and July, because once they get back, they're allowed an acclimation period, you know, before they actually come back to duty. That there shouldn't be another deployment, long-term deployment, you know, for like a year long, for a period of time. The only problem is, 2 of them are in the National Guard, and the state, you know, since COVID started, has found it that they could, you know, activate the National Guard, and I understand in states of emergency and whatnot, but we had one of our officers that was actually activated for about 3 months before he was left there, and he was a prison guard, state prison guard. You know, it was almost to the point where I wanted to see if I could put in some requests to activate the National Guard to come and help supplement our shifts here. You know, maybe we could get them back. But, you know, the staff is on the way. I mean, I know I'm the glasses half full guy, but, you know, we have one that's going through field training now that should be online in a month or so, you know, working, you know, full line, you know, taking on a full line. Again, between May and July, you know, we have, you know, 3 coming back, and then we will have, hopefully, knock on wood, 3 getting out of the academy in the beginning of July. But it's gonna take a period of time to train them, because they're coming to us, albeit one of them has experience on the desk and with our computer system hasn't worked at all. Whereas in the past, we'd always have somebody that worked part-time, so you kind of knock the dust off and kind of figure out what the job is.
are all officers qualified for dispatch?
Yes. Yeah, well, there's a couple of newer officers that aren't. It's just the availability of classes, and there's an ongoing issue. But the veteran officers, I would say 90% are certified and maintain their certification.
Thank you.
Good. Again, thank you for your time, and I know I say this every time, but if anybody individually has any questions and wants to reach out to me or come by the station, I'm an open book. I'll show you and sit down and show everything. I mean, it's not, I wish there was a magic to it, because I could, you know, pull right out of my hat, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
Thanks,
Chief. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, next up to the plate is our new fire chief, Tom Holland.
Alright, so I'm gonna hand you guys 2 things. One is a 3-page document and one is a single page. The 3-page is for fire and EMS, the single page is for EMA. So I get to present you 2 budgets. start with fire and EMS, and for that, the town administrator's recommendation is to go with a budget that's actually a slight decrease. It was what I considered the level funded budget option when I presented the options to him. And the bottom line number is $1,110,986, which is just over a $6,000 decrease from the current fiscal year. The 3-page document that I gave you is a memo that I also gave to Mr. Kelly. It just outlines the different changes to each of the line items. You'll notice there's a lot of movement in my budget from last year to this year. A lot of that is due to me just trying to give you guys a real authentic budget and provide you with the numbers of where everything comes out of when it gets paid. So if we start at the top with salaries, yes.
Chief, just so the Finance Committee, a bookkeeping, not a Scrivener issue, 512-100, where it says salaries part-time EMT, can you strike out EMT
Okay.
and just salaries part-time?
Correct, that's in the memo, but I didn't adjust it on the.
We haven't been able to get into the form yet to do that.
So just going quickly down the list, the line item for the fire chief salary is decreased from last year to this year. That's based on my contract. The salaries, full-time positions is also a decrease. Their contract has been agreed upon and ratified by the selectmen. Just needs to go in front of town meeting. But with the staff that we currently have, we were able to decrease that line item by $19,000. The reason for that is myself and one of the other firefighters who's no longer with us, who transferred to a different department, were the two highest earners. So now we have a full staff of newer people that are at the bottom steps of the contract. The assistant accountant, that's a contractual number based on his contract. The call firefighters line, you'll see, is zeroed out. What I did was we took that plus the part-time EMS line item, and we combined those two and created that part-time salaries. It's for ease of my record keeping, for help out the accounting department. They're both part-time employees, just makes it easier to come out of one bucket of money. Overtime, you'll see, is increased. As we've discussed, our overtime is also up this year. It's been up each of the last years. We are now at full staff. So that number should be a lot closer to where we need to be, just based on the number of overtime, the number of vacation and personal time hours that each of the staff now have. Longevity has been able to be decreased. We now only have 3 staff members actually receiving longevity. That's basically it on the salary side.
Can you tell the committee about the number of runs?
In calendar year 21, we responded to 1,432, I believe.
That total calls?
Total calls, fire
EMS?
and EMS combined. In calendar year 22, which we just concluded, we did 1,583. It's a 10% increase year over year. As of right this minute, we're at 236 for calendar 23, which is 6.5 calls per day. Put that out, projecting out, if we don't slow down, we're looking at over 2,200 calls for the year. So another dramatic increase. Most of those are EMS related, so that helps us out as a town. A lot of those, however, have been fire calls recently. We're currently 90 calls from July to this point in February, 90 transports to the hospital higher this year than last year. So it's not slowing down at all.
You know, a lot of mutual aid going down.
We've
Going on
opened
to-
up mutual aid to everyone, including the city. For a while, we stayed away from the city. They were just sort of abusing the heck out of us and our equipment. So we stopped going there, and then we had the issue with the ambulance being down for a length of time. We opened it back up. They continue to call us, sometimes multiple times a day.
It was two back to back the other day.
And with the staff that we now have, we've been able to make up the difference. If our primary truck goes to the city, we're able to, or Fairhaven, we're able to make up the difference if a call comes into our town. The number of times we've actually called mutual aid in is, I believe the number I gave the selectmen a couple weeks ago was we called mutual aid in 9 times, and we provided mutual aid like 160. So we're able to capture that, so we're not losing out by going to the city. We're able to use the staff that we have on callbacks and make up that difference.
Do you attribute this increase to anything? Is it COVID, do you think, or is it just?
I think it's just a referendum on the healthcare system itself and its whole. I'm sure you guys understand or feel it yourselves, trying to get an appointment with your primary care physician, or if God forbid your primary care physician leaves or retires, trying to get a new one. So that makes a lot of people just say, hey, fine, I'm gonna go to the hospital. And the ER becomes people's primary care, unfortunately.
And if you come in an ambulance,
You sit there just as long. There is no actual benefit to it, even though people think there is. So that's it for the salaries line. Overall, it actually decreases roughly $8,000. On the expense side, that's where we see a little bit of an increase. Increase is only about $2,000, so it gets us to our $6,000 change out. Clothing allowance does go up by $6,000. There's 2 reasons for that. The first one is to keep up with increases in cost with our vendors. And the second one is to cover the cost of the dress uniforms for the firefighters. This is a contractual item that hadn't been fulfilled for several years prior. So that will cover everything that we needed to cover. Energy is up by $3,000. Again, everybody's gas and electric bills are going up. Time will tell if that's enough to help, but we'll see. Repair and maintenance for buildings and grounds, that is a dramatic increase, up to $10,000. Our buildings are getting older. $1,500 for 3 facilities was not enough. We just, is a reserve fund transfer that you'll be seeing at some point in the next couple of weeks. I didn't see it on tonight's agenda, so I don't want to talk about that, but we've had some heating issues and some garage door repair issues. This facility up here, our headquarters, was built in '85. The EMS facility, our Station 3, where the ambulance is primarily held out of, is 96, 95, 96. And Station 2 is historic, so 1954. So that's just to keep up with routine maintenance and hopefully stem the tide there and keep them in good working order.
Chief, could you tell the committee about how we've also been using the senior work-off? And
Yes, we've been able to use the senior work-off people in the maintenance division that Mr. Kelly has. We had some water issues, some moisture issues with our drywall at our headquarters on all the exterior walls. So we've been able to use them. They scraped all the damage down. They've skim coated. It's gotten to the point where it's now ready to be primed and painted, and that's where I come in. I finished this week. My office is completely painted. We have paint ready to go for the welcome area in the dispatch office and also in the bedroom. Not sure what the reason was. I don't know if something wasn't properly flashed. It's all around the windows and the doorways. So it could be improper flashing or no vapor barrier. But using in-town help, we've been able to remedy that situation at very low cost.
That's good.
Repair and maintenance for equipment, that's gonna go up to $8,000. Again, that's just due to increases in contractual things for like our air systems in the stations to keep the diesel exhaust out and things like that. Vehicle maintenance is up to $5,500 to $20,000. Our fleet is an aging fleet. Not only are costs going up, costs of fire apparatus are going up, so all of the different parts that go along with it also go up exponentially. We're looking at our average age truck is 24 years old. So that they're not getting any younger or easier to take care of. Equipment inspection, that actually has stayed the same. We inspect ladders, our pumps, and our air packs, and the cost to do those inspections has not changed, luckily. So we'll see. Software, this is one of those areas where we replaced things where they actually belong. We use software for our EMS reporting, our fire reporting, our policies and procedures. We have laptops in our trucks and computers at the stations for the EMS reporting, so all of those need to be properly licensed and have the software put on them. Radio repair is an increase of $450. I'm working currently with Cybercom to try to address some of the dead spots that we have in town. They're going to be coming down next week and doing a survey, see how old our equipment is, what needs to be repaired, if the current location at the fire tower on Mendel Road is the right location, or if we need to move our equipment to a better tower.
Or an additional tower.
Or an additional tower, depending. Physicals, I increased it to $350. That is because that is the now current cost of sending somebody to the St. Luke's Hospital Occupational Health for a pre-hire physical. The telephone was decreased by $5,000. That's due to we are now connected by fiber. So we are able to use town halls, internet to run our phone system and our internet. Training is slightly increased, $1,500. This is an important one because we help cover some of the costs for the classes that we hold, the trainings that they are required to maintain for their certifications as a paramedic. There's all kinds of classes for that, so that's just to cover those. The quality assurance program has been zeroed out. I've worked with our St. Luke's Hospital med control doctor. We've developed a policy and we'll be able to do all that EMS quality assurance in-house and cost us absolutely nothing. So we were able to take some of that money and spread it into some of these other line items. Turnout gear is the article from the fall town meeting at $40,000. We decreased it to $20,000. This will allow us to continue to buy 5 sets of firefighting gear on a rotating basis. They're only good for 10 years per the NFPA. By keeping this line item in there and buying 5 sets a year, it allows us to avoid having to come to you guys or hope for a grant to buy everybody's at the same time. Office supplies, I increased. Again, that's just the cost of doing business lately. Prices are up. Med surge supplies, it's only up a couple $100. We've worked with some of our vendors to get the best prices on the things that we use the most. We've reached out and looked into some group purchasing with some of our other local departments so that we can get the best prices possible from all our vendors. And by being able to keep the stock that we have, we're in a good spot where we shouldn't need to dramatically increase that unless for some reason we start doing 2,000 calls a year. Oxygen stays the same. I don't think we've fully expended that line item in years. Medical waste is an increase. The service contract for the medical waste, so that's our needle shredding machine. The service contract is $5,000. So we just reallocated some of the money from other line items to make sure that was covered in its entirety.
You get a lot of use out of that?
We get 4 to 5 days every week, somebody's dropping needles off.
Good.
And then obviously Heather gives us a bunch from the Council on Aging as well, so we get our money's worth out of that machine.
Good.
I've also worked with some of the local fire departments too to try to help them out by taking some of theirs on and keep that neighborly
Good relationship.
assistance going. The assessment center is still gonna be 0. We don't see at this point any promotions happening that would require an assessment center. Other equipment is just what it states. It's to buy or help with other equipment that the fire department needs. We're just gonna increase that by $1,600, just prices are going up. Fortunate for us, the state the last few years has provided us with money through the safety equipment grant. We've gotten 19,000 the first year, 16,000 the second year, and 19,000 this year, and that's helped us replace all our fire hose, nozzles, and all kinds of hand tools, different things like that. So that's still got 2 years after this year, so we'll be able to do that, but this will help cover something that we don't have the funding for through that grant.
Do you have a plan for that right now, or is it just wait and see if something goes?
We have some wish list items, but we kind of hold off until end of May, June before we spend anything really out of that line item. In case, we break a truck, that's too much money, we can kind of take from there if we needed to and have that as an offset. Dues and subscription and memberships, that's another increase of $4,000 up to 24. Again, all the different memberships and things that the department and or myself have to be a part of, they don't get any cheaper. And the apparatus undercarriage, which was in the current budget, we're gonna include that as part of the increase in the vehicle maintenance. So that income, that'll be deleted out. So all told, that gives us a decrease of just over $6,000 for our overall budget.
Chief, what's the status on the breathing apparatuses?
We've received them, they are in service. Unfortunately, we did not get awarded the federal AFG grant for that, so we had to use the money set aside from last May's town meeting article.
Now, Chief, tell them about the Christmas list, the big item.
That was gonna be my next
The
question.
Christmas list, the big wish is an article hopefully for $425,000, and that would help us to replace Tanker One. Tanker One is a 36-year-old Ford Motor Company Kodiak. I have a letter from the repair shop on the different things that's going on with it that I hadn't had time to prepare for tonight. Nothing is unrepairable, but at the end of the day, depending on how much money everything costs, I don't have quotes on anything, I just have the list, and it's 40-something items long. We still have a 37-year-old truck. $425,000 gets us a new tanker with a better pump that'll actually carry 3,000 gallons of water instead of 1,800 like our current tanker does. And it would have all of the latest safety features, all of the latest technology, and it would actually comply with all of the latest standards that govern the fire department, which this current tanker does not.
So is Tanker One is the oldest
Truck we have.
The oldest truck.
It's up at Station 2, right?
Yes.
How often does that go up?
It goes out a lot more now.
I was gonna say lately.
We've been able to expand our northern staffing,
Yeah.
so it rolls a lot more now.
Does it go mostly for manpower?
No, we use that truck for water
Yeah.
more than anything. It only fits through 3 people. It's gonna bench seat. It only fits 3.
The new one
it's
is
more
same thing?
new
You don't
one.
have a crew cab? Or?
New one, we have our options. We can go with a 3 or a 4 or a 5-seater, depending on what we choose with the vendors when we start looking at them. For example, last week were in Tiverton, helping Tiverton out. So that's our primary mutual aid truck, because a lot of the communities around us don't have hydrant systems.
That was my department years ago.
So Rochester, Lakeville, Freetown, Dartmouth, Westport, we actually spend a lot of time in all of those communities, as well as our own.
Thanks. Thank you.
Other than the technology article, that will be the article I'm recommending to the Board of Selectmen to them to consider for free cash.
I mean, this is good to bring up in these meetings now. So all departments in town can hear some of the needs that we have, such as in the fire department. And that's why it's important to recognize that when all departments are budgeting as well. that, you know, we have multiple needs in town, and, you know, having a good working fire truck is obviously, is important for many reasons, right? God forbid there's a fire at the school, and we don't have a good working truck to help out. We don't want to see that happen. So, this is,
And as you see, where this would be the only really big item out of the free cash article, or the capital article this year. And we're looking at the 2 vehicles in the police department. And that'll be what we need for our, that will be there in their the budget, because capital articles are 5-year, police cars don't last 5 years. And that's pretty much, other than technology, what we're looking at for our free cash. Everything else will be stabilization funds, MS4, which is going up, and that type of thing. It's not, it's a big wish, but it's, we don't have a big list this year.
Chief,
But
what's
is that really a wish or is that a need?
That's a need in my mind.
Yeah. So I wouldn't even call it a Christmas list wish.
No, it's probably an essential need. What's the average mileage on a fire truck? Like when a truck's getting old, what's a lot of mile, what's it considered?
Our tanker has 18,000 miles.
Tanker 1?
But our trucks don't get a lot of typical use because they're driven to calls and from calls. The trucks that are out of this station headquarters get more use because that's where the staffed firefighter is. Station 2, where tanker 1 is located out, and also engine 1, they will never get as many miles as the trucks out of this one because there's less times that they're driven. They're driven for specifically fire calls or mutual aid calls, where the trucks out of this station here will get used to help out the ambulance on medical calls. They'll do inspections if nobody else is around, if I have meetings, or if I'm out of the office. So
I'm sure they get a lot more hours than miles.
yes, yeah. Idling hours, pumping hours, that's all.
That's
added
really
wear-
the
that's
wear
all
and
added
tear
wear
on
and
the
tear.
vehicle,
Correct.
is operating hours.
Correct.
Good point.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Chief?
Thanks, Chief.
Chief, thanks for coming in.
No,
I got
See you,
part
Nick.
2.
Part
I got
two.
EMA.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
right. I'm jumping the gun. I'm jumping the gun.
This one's gonna be so much longer than the fire department budget.
Oh, boy.
Am I looking at the right one?
The EMA budget is a decrease of $2,200. We reworked,
2249.
I said about.
Well, she's an accountant now.
Yeah,
Tom knows.
Oh,
We go way back.
Okay.
oh, I-
We go way back.
So you can give
we
her
don't
a-
round
Sal-
I can't give Mark time.
Salaries isn't that much of a change. It's increased a little bit. Deputy Director Ed Karen and myself are working to kind of fix up our emergency management plans. There's a few of them. We have a comprehensive emergency management plan. We have continuity of operations, shelter management plan, and a hazards mitigation plan. So those 4 are all in need of being updated. So that's the increase there. You'll notice there's a decrease in the shelter line item. As you can see, we, again, I'll knock on wood, we haven't fully spent that line item due to storms or having to open a shelter yet. So I'm gonna knock on wood.
Yeah.
I don't wanna jinx
Good idea,
myself.
good idea.
So that's for the decrease there. On the expenses side, energy is up and pretty much everything else stayed the same. You'll notice telephone and internet came out. Again, that's a function of being hooked up with fiber. That's also the software expense. I believe Nick was working with the EMA IT guy on that, and that's why that $500 came out.
Yep.
And travel, we don't usually travel, so that came out. It was only $150, but that came out. Everything else remains the same.
So the committee knows, I've worked with the chief in accounting because in the past, there's been some commingling of the salaries from staff and the salaries from the shelter at the end of the year, and we'd rather, for transparency purposes, put somewhat of a wall between the two. So if we use the shelter salaries, it's because we've opened the shelter.
Mhm.
It's not that we've ran out of money at the end of the year in the other line.
Any questions for the chief on EMS?
Is there something about a motor issue? Did I miss that? On the ambulance?
That's
That was the reserve fund transfer.
that's coming in as a reserve fund transfer.
We should have it back soon.
So we've only got one ambulance now.
Currently.
It's not the ambulance that we repaired
No.
before.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
The first thing I asked the chief was,
Which one?
which one and is it under warranty?
No and no.
All right, I think we're done now, right? I didn't miss anything.
I'm all done.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I got no more tricks on my pocket.
All right, chief, thanks for coming in. If we have any
Thank you.
questions, we'll reach out.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chief.
I'll be there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is Mr. Kelly. Yep.
Select board budget. Start with that one. The salaries, there's this section, there's a slight decrease in longevity. I'm not sure if everything else is pretty much flat except for $344, which is my increase in my contract. We put an increase in professional technical for some of the meetings that I have been going to and also sending staff to for trainings. I have been sending staff from other offices to the MMA meetings that I think it's appropriate for them to go to. For example, the assistant treasurer collector went to the MMA conference and attended some HR and some health insurance seminars because that's what she handles. These people in the past have not had training, and the town has not used the MMA to the extent they should to train folks because it's the cheapest form of training around, and it's you're learning from people that are in the business and have been doing it for years. And I would rather have these people trained than have a mistake made and we end up have some liability down the road. And it helps decrease our liability insurance.
Well, I would imagine that there's probably, changes in laws frequently, right? And so it's probably a good idea to maybe every year attend attend one of these, it's like a weekend, correct? Is it?
It's Friday, Saturday morning,
Okay.
but there are others during the year. The real issue here is if you go to an MMA sanctioned event, you get the equivalent of professional development points, but it goes to help the town's professional liability insurance, which decreases. So it's a win-win that way. We get trained staff and we get a slight reduction in our liability insurance, or in the case this year, I think when you talk to Nick with technology, you'll see that they gave us money for security cameras. You will see that Code Red, which has been moved to technology, I think it's the appropriate place for it to be. The communication advertising are typical for public hearings. The town reports, we're having to use new folks, and so it's going to go up slightly. Office supplies, it's slight. We decreased travel because I've noticed you had pre-COVID, you had people who traveled more extensively than I do, and as far as to meetings and stuff, and so I don't think we need the 750. I'm not sure we even need the 500, but dues, subscriptions, membership, that's MMA and various subgroups, mass, legal, that type of thing. And part of it is because of my contract, I have membership in certain groups guaranteed. And I believe it's a win-win for me and the town. Any questions? And we haven't, the Board of Selectmen hasn't finalized the budget. We've kept it open just in case we have to revisit it and start using the scalpel and start using the machete. Any questions? Legal services, how about that one? I've restructured this for transparency reasons. For legal expenses in the past, the budget has been $67,500, and then you hit also, especially because of a particular lawsuit, you've been hitting the reserve fund. What you've also been doing is taking the $17,000 from land court and putting that into legal expenses. This year, you're not going to have that luxury because, as I've reported to the board, or the committee, we have discovered that there's approximately $450,000 of taxes that has been uncollected, and the town has not gone through the process to guarantee their rights of collection. And we are doing that now, and we will be using some of that $17,000 for that purpose, if not all of it, depending on how far we get with some. Of the $450,000, as of yesterday, $140,000 has been collected. And that's just after mailings and advertising before we even went into the land court situation. It goes back to 2018. And it's going to continue next year. So that's why I've left the 17,000. And I've increased the legal expenses to 80,000 to show a more realistic figure. I've moved the tax title attorney from the treasurer's office here. It's a separate legal expense. It's a separate attorney. It makes more sense to put all your legal expenses under your legal budget. And for transparency purposes, it shows what you're spending. Questions? Town buildings and properties. We've transferred the 10,353 out of the building commissioner that was used, put under the heading of building commissioner, but everyone told me it was a stipend for the prior incumbent to somewhat oversee the building maintenance. I've inserted the salaries for the foreman. We have advertised once, we are advertising again. We were unsuccessful in the first, getting someone to apply who had the skills necessary for the amount of money we've been advertising. We'll try it a second time. In maintenance, I decreased from last year's budget, and that's because we've been using part-time folks and people that are young. So we've been able to use step one here. And we've used some retirees that are can only make a certain amount of money. And so we've got actually we have a crew of 3 where we had a crew of 2 before, but they're part-time. And I invite you to see the new conference room next to the mail room there. As you heard, they've done the work over on the fire station. They've did the doors and the floor down at the COA. So I'm very happy with what's going on. We're getting a lot of work done, but I would like to find a foreman to oversee it instead of using myself and the building commissioner. I've moved the custodian help from the COA and library budgets here, because I think if you have custodial personnel, it belongs in the building and maintenance. It doesn't belong in under the COA budget or the library budget. That also means that we have a little bit of flexibility where we can use someone if we need them. We've talked to the unions, they agree that the view is that they're assigned to the town, not to the particular building, especially if we budget this way. The temporary I've taken out. We're putting an article in from free cash for a youth work program. In the past, this was for summer help. We are going to try to put a program together and fund it the first year out of free cash, and then we'd be continuing the funding as an article, similar to what we're going to be doing with an article for the senior work-off program. gives kids work ethics, it pays them decent salary. We're talking to Old Colony as far as getting some of their kids here in the summer to help out. We're going to be helping out in Parks and Rec with the buildings and with DPW. And the overtime is the overtime, it's flat, and the longevity we removed because we have no contractual liability for longevity with the way things are going right now. Clothing allowance, we increased a little bit because we've got a bunch of people. Energy, I admit, was a guesstimate. Repair and maintenance, building and grounds. You've got a number of needs in your buildings. Your buildings are getting older. You also have just some basic needs. There's going to be carpeting that needs to be replaced in certain areas. Small areas, it's not a large-scale job. Painting, you heard what happened at the fire station. There's various needs all throughout the town and with some of your parks. And this is my view of how we keep ahead of it with the 30,000, which is flat. Custodial services, we've got custodial services right now in the high-traffic buildings. And it seems to be working. If it's, at this point, if it's not broke, I'm not willing to change it. I might come back to you in the future to do that, but not now. I've only been here a year to see what's going on, so I think that the safety of the buildings is something we're going to focus on in the future, and so the building is clean, and so I'm fine with it. Postage decreased by half. You have been taking approximately $15,000 out of this line. And you've also been taking money out of the treasurer's line to send out tax bills. You're using one vendor, but you're taking money out of two lines. It's not what you're supposed to do as far as accounting is DOR, and I'm surprised the auditor didn't give us a minor slap on it. If you're using one vendor and the vendor is actually, as part of the contract, charging you for the postage, you shouldn't be paying the vendor out of two different lines. It actually looks like you might be trying to hide something in a bid. So it's better to pay for it all out of that line, so that's what we've done. And we decreased supplies slightly. Questions? You might hear the Board of Selectmen joke about how I'm moving all sorts of cans around, but it's my chance to make sure the basic budgeting is done right while I'm here.
No, it's your first full year here, so it's the first time you had a chance to do this type of stuff, so.
Well, and we're kind of doing it in the treasurer collector's office and the finance office in different manners to make sure they're run right too. Discovering various things. Soil board. I've left the inspector salary there. We do not have an inspector right now, but I'm looking for a soil professional to advise the board. And office supplies, I've increased. I don't see the salary for clerical, the need for it. But I do see office supplies because it also includes advertising, and we're going to have to do some serious advertising coming up to hold public hearings. And it's a decrease. Street lighting. Which I'm not sure why it's under the selectmen's tab, but it was, versus DPW, but energy, we decreased somewhat when we looked at the actuals, but I also put $8,000 in for, and it's repair and maintenance. It's really repair and maintenance of the fixtures. It's not buildings and grounds. But
Some of those fixtures are wicked dim. I mean, you drive down Main Street and you got some that are bright and some that are dim, and it's like.
well, the real thing here is we've got at least 8 that have to have repairs to right now, and there was no budget to actually repair them. There was street lighting just had an energy budget. You had no, and now you own the fixtures. At some point, you're gonna have to repair some of them. And I think, I know of a couple right now that you have to repair, and if a pole's taken down, we have to pay to put the fixture back up.
Yeah, they had one down on my street, it was almost a year before it got removed. The pole's been taken out probably 3 times in the years that I've lived there, and they just put up an LED light on it and took it out, and it was dark, and for almost a year before an outside, I guess, was it going to an outside vendor that has to come in to replace those?
Well, there has to be, yeah, it's.
They have to have a certain number of them before they'll come into town to do it, so. But it did get replaced, but.
Yeah, but I mean, and we had no repair budget for it.
Yeah.
So I looked at the energy cost and then talked to our advisor about it, and they said that this was probably, for the time being, the good estimate of what we're going to have to do as far as actually the maintenance and installation or reinstallation of the fixtures. Miscellaneous. The selectmen haven't, they've approved this budget. They haven't closed it off yet because of its being a preliminary approval. Compensated balances, we left 5,000 there even though we have the fund established. The problem is if someone up and leaves before we can get to a town meeting, we need to have access to some funds, so that's why we left the 5,000 there. Celebrations and beautifications are level. Agricultural is level. Shellfish and herring are level. Acushnet Cultural Council is level. Safety Committee, we left $100 there just in case we have to have a public hearing and do some advertising. And the Lake Street Improvement Committee money, Mr. Wonar suggested we remove it from here, and we've got an article that we're working off of and we should probably, I think he's there tonight at city council to get the authorization to start Lake Street from New Bedford finalized through all the legalities over there.
It's been a long process.
I think we could have gone and had an act passed at the legislature quicker than we could have done this. Yeah, it's been a long time, but part of it was you had to go through their public works or the department. Then it went to the mayor's office and went through 3 sets of attorneys because they kept leaving the mayor's office. And then we went to council. And that's been, for the year that I've been here, I don't know what happened before. And we met with the mayor twice. Hopefully he'll get it out, and then we can start some work. Because the beautiful thing about the Lake Street work on the weeds and cleaning up that pond, it counts towards our MS4 effort. And so we get 2 for the price of 1.
Plus the usability, which is a big thing.
Yeah. And DPW's got some supplies in, I think, as far as the parking lot and some of the safety guardrails and stuff like that, so it's starting to move.
Well, Mr. Kelly, I think it's good that we have a seasoned veteran in municipal government like yourself, and that's no reference to age or anything, to help clean things up and organize things like you've been doing. So it's looking better.
Well, with age comes wisdom, because 40 years ago I would have been an entirely different person.
We all would be.
Yes.
You'd only been 12 years old then. You'd only been 12 years old then, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish.
Okay, next on the agenda, old business. So under old business, I think I'd like to just bring this up and see what the board's feeling is on this. You know, we've had a member, one of our members, Jackie Stanley. She hasn't been here in a while. So, what's the feeling of the board right now as far as what to do as far as her seat?
I think lack of attendance alone. I mean, has anybody reached out to her and talked to her about this, about why she hasn't shown up, or?
If it gets removed from the committee, does that affect our quorum because she's technically no longer a listed member, or does? I
No,
thought
it
you had
opens
mentioned
up.
a while ago that our quorum changes based on the actual members we have on the committee.
No, it opens a slot if we.
It would mean that you could fill it. Your quorum is 5, I believe. It's an
It is,
argument.
and that's regardless of
Yeah.
sitting members.
If she's
But,
off
but
there,
if you've got someone who does not attend,
because
then-
Bob came back.
you're out, you know, it's like trying to put a team on the field.
Yeah,
You got less-
I thought a while ago you had mentioned that it would be quorum requirements based on town charter or something.
No, it's, the charter is, sets the number.
Right, so, okay. I make a motion then that we submit a letter or request a letter be sent to the Board of Selectmen.
I'll second that.
asking that she be taken off the committee. I mean, there have been attempts made over the several years to contact her.
So she's,
Since I've been here.
2 years ago, she showed up once.
oh, she's listed on the emails that go out.
Right.
That, so, I mean, Kathy's sending them to her, so I don't,
She was reappointed
Last year?
shortly after I got here, I think.
Mm-hmm.
okay, so what's the official motion?
That we request a letter, that we submit a letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting that they remove her from.
Has anybody ever talked to her or
I have not talked to her personally.
asked her, why she's not showing up, or?
Well,
We can just ask her to submit a letter of resignation, right, and then that'll take care of it.
Yeah, if she don't intend to show up,
You
Yeah.
got two options, either she resigns or you request the Board of Selectmen under the charter review her attendance.
Or would you feel more comfortable with me, like either myself or somebody from the board directly reaching out to her first and asking her?
I think that would be a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll retract my motion then, I mean, if that's what
Yeah.
we.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can reach out to her. I'll email her and see if she responds and just ask her to.
Okay.
She hasn't responded that I know of to any.
Has she responded to any of our your emails, Kathy?
No.
So we don't even know if her email is valid.
Yeah.
If
All
it
right,
was.
so- All right, so let's do that.
I can also get a current email. My aunt knows her husband very well, so I can try that way too.
Okay, all right, then let's do that first
Yeah,
then.
let me do that.
Okay. All right, next, new business. Anybody have any new business to discuss? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, would you, as you know, revenues,
Do you want to do a little quick review of where we stand right now as a town?
revenues had about 800,000 increase. March 1st, we will be getting, the governor hopefully will file her House budget, and that will include local aid, Chapter 70, and Chapter 71, which affects the regional VOTEC. And maybe that will refine some of those figures, maybe increase, I put what I thought the increase would be based on averages of past years in UGGA and Chapter 70 in my estimate of the 808,742. Right now, back of the envelope, we are increasing the budget 1,527,849 if we use the Old Colony estimate and the estimate from the schools. That's so in effect, we're 700 and approximately 20,000 out of balance. And that's why I said earlier that we started with the scalpel, and I think we're going to have to go to a machete to
I think we're at the chainsaw.
starting to cut things.
Yeah, it's a big deficit. And, it's,
I don't see UGGA and Chapter 70 for the town going up more than 50,000 beyond what our estimate was now. And that is being real rosy.
And so that way we're all on the same page. In the past, we have used free cash to balance the budget, but as you explained, that is not an acceptable,
It's not sustainable.
it's not sustainable and no longer acceptable. Well, maybe never was acceptable, but Lord knows we've done it, and I know over the years we've tried to get away from that.
Right.
And so,
You gotta
our
remember.
option is only to balance the budget.
Yep, you gotta remember, if you use free cash, according to DOR, you're supposed to come up with a 3-year plan, how you're gonna
Wean yourself
make
off.
up the difference. Now, the problem is with free cash, if you put free cash in the budget a couple of years ago, then the next year it's part of your base.
Mhm.
And it's part of your 2.5. And so, every time you use free cash,
You're hurting yourself the next year.
you're hurting
Yes.
the taxpayers considerably
Well, and-
the next year, because you're using one-time money.
That's gonna be a full-time effect.
Yep.
That has the ripple, the continuous ripple.
Well,
That-
if we have an unforeseen expenditure with, like, let's say, a fire
The
truck,
fire
for
truck.
example, how are we gonna pay for that? Right?
And the other real issue is, if you consistently use free cash, and in your case, your free cash is, since I've looked at the figures the last couple of years, your free cash is going down because you're budgeting tighter.
Right.
And so you're gonna have less and less free cash going forward. And of that free cash, if you use it to constantly replenish your budget, your capital items are going to be hurt.
You're never gonna get to them.
And you're going to reach the point where it hits your audit.
Well, we're gonna be bonding a bunch of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it hits your audit.
Which is debt, which is
and-
annual
and
for
your
a
bond
lifetime.
rating is going to go
Go to
down.
crap. Which means higher interest when you do have to bond.
Yep.
And we're not
More
going,
expensive.
and we're not gonna raid the general stabilization fund either, because that is not a good practice.
I'm gonna
That's
be,
worse than hitting free cash.
Right, exactly.
I'm
That's-
gonna be recommending you putting at least 100,000 of free cash into the general stabilization fund, because to keep your bond rating, you have to have that general stabilization fund at about 10% of your budget. And your budget right now is around 35 mil. And
We are
your,
not at 10%.
and your budget was 34 mil, your general stabilization was 3,400,000.
But now we're at 3.5, and in order to keep pace, we have to continue to put in.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, if you use stabilization, the emergency fund, to balance a budget, that is worse than using free cash, because you never get out of that. You will always have to hit stabilization, and that well runs dry.
Well, and we're supposed to keep a certain percentage
And we're supposed to keep,
in the general stabilization fund anyway.
right,
correct. And
Like-
you're supposed to build your OPEB, and you're right now where your OPEB is supposed to be, so that doesn't affect your bond rating. And you're gonna have to put money in your OPEB fund again this year. You've actually lost money, OPEB money, because you invested it with the state, and we're investigating getting out of that arrangement that 2 prior town administrators put you in, because the way the market is, you've been getting feed to death on your OPEB money and not making any money.
That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, our stabilization fund is essentially an emergency savings account. And, you know, I mean, anybody who's running a household, you know, you should have some money for a rainy day in case something unforeseen happens, to cover your monthly expenses, right? So we're no different as a municipality, and that's how we have to have that mentality, in my opinion.
One major hurricane, and you might have to rebuild buildings, and that's what the stabilization fund's for, including the schools.
And, I mean, our sewer lines, right, like that are a century old, if
The
those go.
water lines.
The water lines, sorry,
Yes.
forgive me, what am I saying, we don't have sewer. The water lines are a century old. If something happens to those, right, like,
We have to replace them.
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what you hit stabilization for.
And
It
then-
is isn't it I mean, it's like the insurance policy you hope you never need, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta have it. Why do we buy car insurance? You know, homeowners insurance.
And
This is a safety net. It's
Exactly.
another form of a safety.
I mean, the other thing I do not want to see happen is for us as a town to ask our residents for a tax override. I mean, we already pay enough in property taxes. And people this year took a big hit. Probably seen a big increase this year. You know, thanks to, you know, various factors. And also, yes, inflation is definitely one of them. You know, everybody is facing increased utility bills, et cetera. It's across the board, you know, and
I saw
you can't expect we can't be expecting the federal government to just keep printing money, you know, because if they keep doing that, the inflation's just going to keep going up, right? So
I saw a cartoon for Valentine's Day that had a dozen roses equal a dozen eggs.
well,
It's so true.
And the other issue is, you know, and I've said this over and over again, ad nauseum, is, you know, we have a lot of residents in our town on fixed incomes, and they can't. A lot of these people cannot. They're just getting by, you know, paying their bills, and any little increase can make a big difference in a lot of these folks.
Your town hasn't changed population much in 20 years.
Mhm.
The demographics show that it's not one of these towns that's going to get a lot of money in state or federal aid because of the demographics of the town. You're not a gateway city. And your population's graying, according to the demographics. So, it's, like you said,
that
it's
is true.
fixed income.
That is true, but these people are also living longer too. There's more longevity. So a lot of these people want to stay in their homes.
Yeah.
My grandmother was one of them. She lived in her house in Acushnet until she was 99 years old. She passed in 2022. She was a couple months shy of 100 years old. So it was an amazing thing to see her. She didn't not want to leave her house. That she was adamant about not going into a nursing home. So it made it work, and you know, it's just it's folks in that realm, in that category. We have to think of everybody in town, not just, you know, particular groups. So when departments are doing their budgets, they have to take all that into consideration.
The town budget, with minor cuts like you've seen tonight, we're looking at a 2.48 increase. That's before any major cuts. The joint accounts, the insurances, stuff like that, admittedly, we're out on RFPs. We haven't got that back yet. We will in the next month to 5 weeks. But we're looking, our estimates are 7.4% increase. Debt has gone down 66,638 just because of the fact of we're extending down the years, and so principal and interest decreases. State assessments, I level funded in my estimate, because you have no way of knowing, for example, school choice.
Well, speaking of schools, I mean, we can't just think of the next year or the next year after that. We have to think way in advance of that. And I'll use Old Colony as an example. You know, we're gonna be faced with a, $150,000 feasibility study to determine if next year, if Old Colony is going to do renovations to their existing building, or they're gonna try and build a brand-new school. And, you know, we have kids in town who wanna go to Old Colony. So that potentially is gonna be something that I would imagine would be bonded if there was a major project that was gonna be going on. So that's gonna be another debt that we're gonna be potentially
Well,
facing.
you don't know if you should bond it, or an article
Well,
from
that's something
free
they're gonna do in a
cash.
feasibility study, correct? So,
But down the road, whether it's repair and reno or a new building, that's gonna be a substantial debt.
mhm.
I'm sorry, so you were saying bonding, whether we bond the 150 feasibility study?
I wouldn't do that, I'd take it
No,
off.
I agree.
Yeah, not that. I'm
I thought
talking
you were
about-
implying
no.
that the whole building, I'm like,
No.
how the heck are we gonna pay it if we're not bonding for this thing?
No, yeah, I'm talking about the bigger
Yes,
picture.
yes,
After that
Okay.
feasibility study, that would be.
That's what I thought you were talking
That would be like a
about.
free cash,
Yeah,
item,
Bonanza, if we could pay for the.
right?
then we'd have no problem. Maybe
But-
we'll have a wealthy resident pass away and leave want to mitigate their estate tax and
But the old,
Leave their assets
the old
in town.
colony increase, which was a preliminary estimate on their part,
yeah.
was almost 19% increase, 432,000 and change.
Partly due because we have a significant increase in students. 18
folks.
students is a big jump.
Yep.
It's a big jump. Okay.
But you also have to remember that the tuition for the regional folk tech is considerably more than the tuition for the general ed high schools at Fairhaven or New Bedford.
Well, you have the shops.
Yeah, it's because of the shops.
But that's typical across the Commonwealth.
Right.
The real issue here is we're probably going to have to pare some money out of the town budgets that you've seen so far. And the school is looking for over $650,000 increase in their original figures. And that's a huge amount. That the school budget, Old Colony, Bristol County, together is $1,100,000 round figure and increase. And the revenue, my revenue estimate increase is 800,000. So just with those, not including health insurance or anything else, you're 300,000 out of balance.
Already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
With the two schools in Bristol County retirement.
Yeah, so there's gonna have to be some adjustments to be made. All right, next on the agenda, we have a set of minutes to approve from February 1st. In attendance was myself, Sue, Pete Benoit, Eric Chu, Eric McGlynn, and Mr. St. Jean.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Our next meeting is going to be on March 1st, so we're not meeting next week, it's a school vacation week. So on March 1st, we have confirmed golf coming in, conservation. There's a question mark with regards to DPW. So those will, if DPW comes in, we'll have 3 coming in. So we're getting closer to completing.
And most likely accountant, the treasurer collector, some of those will come in. I'll let Kathy know. It's,
On March 1st?
yeah, we're working with the Board of Selectmen
Okay.
on some of them. As far as, also, I had an issue that I had to clarify with town council on some of the budgets you haven't seen yet.
Okay.
And technology, Nick will come in and do his best to mesmerize you with everything he is doing with very little money.
Sounds good. Thank you for the update.
Make a motion
We
to
have a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
Good night.